the great thing about your programs, Dr. Dolomite, is that you have collected an immense amount of data, and I think the data is key. And we were lucky enough to look through that data and collect some of that those interesting notes, those interesting findings, because you really did cover all your bases with these.
I certainly tried.
All right, so
a citizen scientist if I've ever seen one.
So let's get into
with
them.
a PhD, citizen scientist with a PhD.
Let's
the best kind.
Let's go ahead and get into
okay.
these. Just in this first part here, why don't you tell us your what this is about? I already covered it, but let's just go through it real quick so we can hear it from your words, Dr. Dolomite.
What are you asking exactly?
Oh, could you?
What is this data? What are we about to be? We're going to be seeing some testimonials. What should we expect from these testimonials?
Well, we try to keep track of which group of children is the most prepared. Weight classes, height classes, age groups, any data that we could surmise from any given child, we try to record and feed into our system, so to speak. And we do grade our children. We do try to keep track on who's doing the best, who's doing the worst, et cetera, et cetera. So if you were to ask me what any given demographic, what are their chances of survival? I feel as though I could tell you with 90% certainty that if they will survive into the future and their legacy will continue or not.
Excellent. Well, let's get into these testimonials.
So you can go. Can you go? Can you see these as we pull them up? There, Doctor.
Oh yes, I see them.
Okay. Okay. So we have our testimonial one here. A young woman, Sienna L.
Sienna, of course.
Age 7. From Illinois. A lot of these individuals are from Illinois.
It's a really susceptible. I know you've done a lot of work. Not necessarily in Chicago, but in the Illinois region.
It's funny you mentioned. We did notice that a lot of our applicants came from Illinois. They seem to be the most concerned about preparedness.
That's that Midwestern sort of sentimentality. So this simulation, as you mentioned, there's a number of simulations that you go through, a lot of different scenarios. DPS 1111 Ocean Man. Do you want to tell us about this simulation, what exactly went on? I'm guessing there's a nautical aspect, perhaps, and something to do with climate change, perhaps?
Of course. Well, any climate data will show you that sea levels are rising, the world is getting hotter, things are going to get wet very fast, very soon. Now, we like to assume that given these rising sea levels, we're going to see new beings, new creatures emerge from the sea and try to maybe reclaim what was lost once to them. Do you understand?
That is a common a thought among the far east side as well.
Yes.
So as we understand it, any of these creatures, they're going to have distinct things. They're going to have a smell. They're going to make a noise. There's going to be things that you look out for in anticipation of the ocean man coming. And what this simulation did was we would fill the room with the stink of the sea. We would pump the sound of crashing waves and screaming dolphins and whale songs and all the horrors that the ocean really has to offer. And on top of all that, we had a man dressed as the ocean man, as we like to call him. He's wearing one of those old-timey diving bells, and he's covered in seaweed, and he would throw crabs at the children. It was great fun looking back.
You touched on all your bases there.
Yeah, no, I mean, and this quote here seems to she mentioned that it was a good time. Do you want to go ahead and read that for us and give us some insight on what she meant by this?
Sienna could not stop talking about how much she loved the dolphin noises and the pictures that we showed her of the dolphin corpses that she'd encounter.
Even as she danced around crabs that were snapping at her feet, she could not stop pay attention to nothing other than the dolphins.
An indomitable spirit, that Sienna, I have to say. I remember her fondly.
Okay, so run us through these results. I see we have cooperation, reproducibility, and likelihood of survival. Can you break down what those stats mean and sort of in this scenario what we're seeing about Sienna and her likelihood in the ocean man sort of scenario?
As much as I love Sienna, she was a pleasure to have. Her stats, they didn't measure up. loath to say. Her cooperation was just, she would scream and run off and try to hide in the corner of the room while her team was being let down. And,
she had a job.
I understand these are children, but you have to understand that we're trying to prepare them for an apocalyptic hellscape. So we really strictly grade these things.
Right. And it does seem like Sienna was not the only one. It seems like reproducibility-wise, there are a lot of children that you face that are just, you might even call them a Sienna at this point. Like, we got a Sienna here.
We do. We don't like to admit it, but we do kind of have little terms that we call the children, like Sienna. Sienna did kind of stick, now that you mention it.
Yeah. Okay, so...
and let's just say the likelihood of survival, we got a 2% here.
Well, as I said, she would hide in the corner of the room. She wouldn't try to, create any of the tools that we taught her to create.
Right.
When the ocean man came up to her and told her what the things he would do to her, she just cried and said no. She had no ability to get away. It just didn't work out for poor Sienna.
Backed herself into a corner.
It's unfortunate to say.
I mean, the ocean man sounds like quite an adversary. So, to be fair, I don't know what my likelihood of survival would be versus the ocean man.
Mm-hmm. But we do have another one.
Yeah, let's go ahead. So here we have Cameron T.
Cameron,
6 years old, from Alsip, Illinois. And this was DPS 03387 Silent Mound. Now this was a very interesting scenario because sort of looking through the pamphlets you provided, there was a lot of mist. Mm-hmm. There was this sort of a lot of
horror theme,
sort of a psychological aspect as well. Do you have much to say about this Silent Mound scenario?
Well, DPS 03387 was one of our more out there simulations, I must admit. Mm-hmm. But we don't like to rule out anything. Like, given the way the world's going, there's just no predicting what's happening. Who's to say there's not going to be some kind of hellish apocalyptic scenario where, well, let's just say that we thought it pertinent to simulate sort of a nightmare attack, sort of like a more psychological, like, not so much wasteland raiders coming to raid your base and steal your food, but the things that live down in your psyche actually achieving corporeality and coming and, taking their revenge on you, so to speak.
And that makes this quote is all the more perhaps chilling or sort of incriminating, perhaps. You want to read that for us?
Cameron did like to yell how he didn't do anything, how he has no guilt, he doesn't understand the monsters he's seeing. And we would sit down. We would explain to him, Cameron, these are your fears and guilts coming out and attacking you and making you pay for the things you've done. And he would just say, I didn't do anything. Cameron was let's just call him a special case.
Right. And it really is representative with these results here, it looks like.
Well, I mean, as I've said, his cooperation was, he refused to face himself.
If you can't cooperate with yourself, then who can you cooperate with?
And, that's the whole point of the simulation, Cameron. We've explained to him multiple times, you have to face your fears. You have to defeat these creatures. And he just couldn't get past not being able to accept his role in their creation.
Well, yeah, likelihood to survive, unfortunately, 8%.
And once again, to be fair, I don't know how well I would personally survive if I had to go through a psychodrama, unfolding, wrestling with monstrosities of my own guilt. I think that would be quite difficult, even for an adult. But it's important to be prepared.
I certainly wouldn't want to go through it.
Oh, no, God.
But we have a few more. Next one is case testimonial number 3. Hopefully this one is a little bit more interesting. So this is Cooper S., age 10 years old, location Rockford, Illinois, another Illinoisan. And this is simulation DPS 06767 Forest Dweller. Would you like to talk about what that one is?
So this one's one of our more traditional simulations that we had come up with. The world has ended, the economy's collapsed, everyone's fending for themselves, and we pitched to the children the concept of them having holed up in the forest and creating sort of a forest fortress to defend and maintain. And the children did very well at that for the 4 months I ran this program. But at the end, we had to test them. We had to test their readiness. And that's where the forest dweller came in.
Right.
We would black out the room, complete darkness. We would simulate the sounds of the forest at night. Foxes screaming, owls shrieking, the sound of crunching leaves and swirling winds, and all the things you'd experience should you ever be in the forest at night. On top of that, while the children were maintaining their stations and achieving their goals, all in complete darkness, of course, the forest dweller would come, and he would reek of alcohol and just basic what you can expect a wastelander to smell like.
Of course.
It was gunpowder, explosives. He would mutter to himself as he walked through the children, and basically the simulation was for the children to not get dwelled upon by the forest dweller.
And it does look like Cooper was fairly successful based on this quote. Would you mind reading us this quote from Cooper S.?
She would say this often: "I shan't wander beyond the limits of our encampment, as Pastor says. It's safer for little old me here in our simple schoolhouse." She was a very good student. She played the part, so to speak. She got very into the simulation.
And we do have some results here. Wow, it looks like Cooper did quite well in this scenario, at least compared to some of the other ones.
Oh, Cooper was a top student for sure, and you can check the stats as I've sent over to you if you don't even believe me. She is one of 3 other students to actually kill the forest dweller, and we're still dealing with the legality of that situation. But in terms of passing the simulation and surpassing our expectations, Cooper really knocked it out of the park.
Fantastic. All right, so we're running a little low on time, so let's just run through these next 2 real quick. We have case testimonial number 4, Liam A., 15, and from Aurora, Illinois. And this is another, I think, an interesting one that I just very quickly kind of want to have my mind wrapped around, which is DPS 02069, fungal ascendancy.
Fungal ascendancy, one of my favorites.
Oh, you see, that doesn't sound like a post-apocalyptic scenario that I'm terribly familiar with. Sort of, would you mind diving into that very briefly?
Well, any mycologist will tell you that we are at the mercy of funguses, and we only exist simply because they allow us to. At any given moment, they could turn on us.
That's fair. I have heard actually that before from some of my mycologist friends.
Yeah, but let's see.
Please go on.
Oh, I was just gonna say, well, let's see what Liam has to say about the scenario that you put them in. Liam did not enjoy the slimy man. You just look at his face. You know that he didn't really enjoy it.
And is this slimy man, is he made...
That's the point of the slimy man, Liam. We would say that to him.
So excuse me, is this slimy man, is he composed of fungus? Is he covered in fungus? What does the slimy man represent in this scenario?
Well, the concept of the slimy man was a man who... was overtaken by the fungal ascendancy and became sort of a shock trooper for the fungus to go into various human strongholds and dwellings and just kind of make a mess of things for them.
I wouldn't like him either, frankly.
So we have some results here from Liam. It doesn't look like Liam did particularly well with this either.
Liam didn't do well, but I won't say he did bad.
Sure.
He did within the projected ranges of how well the children were going to react to the slimy man, as they like to call him.
Right.
We called him Ted.
I mean, this is a 15-year-old, it's a hard time, a lot of hormones.
Yeah,
it's a stressful thing that he's going through. The slimy man we overlooked.
And better than 15% is that the survival chance of around 15? Is that what you're looking for after one of these programs? Is that a good value?
Well, we rate the success ranges based on the killability of whatever scenario and fungal ascendancy. Should that happen, humanity, it's very unlikely that we survive that.
Right, so it's a good value for the scenario.
Given what the tools were giving to the children, they did okay, I have to say.
And we do have one more.
We have one more.
And this is a very fascinating one.
This is little Jasmine R, 11 years old, from Eureka, Illinois. Oh, look at that. This was DPS 03387 Mad Maxwell. What? That's very evocative, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. Am I to assume this was a sort of a deserty, raider, sort of your classic post-apocalypse?
This is your classic post-apocalypse. There's no better way to put it. This is what you think of when you hear the word apocalypse.
Oh, fantastic. And based on this quote, it seems to me like Jasmine actually did quite well. Could you read that and dive into it for us?
I am the undisputed master of the Badlands. I have suckled on the skulls of the vanquished, and stand before the masses as their ruler, Sand Lord, the sickle, and the scythe. She would say that constantly.
Sort of a mantra.
Jasmine is one of the 3 students that I mentioned earlier that actually killed the forest dweller. Jasmine was one of our best students.
Right.
Well, fantastic. So you're putting these children through multiple of these scenarios to sort of prepare them.
Based on their scores, we like to have scoreboard leaders. And should these scoreboard leaders succeed in one scenario, we say, okay, how do you handle this scenario? And so on and so forth, until eventually we ask them if they'd like to volunteer in the program. It's sort of a graduation system.
Oh, fantastic. And her results were actually, I mean, once again, I can't quite tell, but it looks like her results were actually quite good on the survival end at the very least.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, we discourage empathy. And Jasmine, above and beyond in not having empathy. Like some of the other counselors said her methods were cruel in just dominating the simulation. I cannot overstate how impressed I was with Jasmine's performance in the Mad Maxwell simulation.
Fantastic. Well, based on these testimonials, it certainly seems to me like you are doing a service, and these children are coming out of this one way or another, having learned a lesson.